Welcome to my channel. My name is Julia Billig, and I am passionate about studying European history and art, especially from the 11th to the 17th centuries. Each of my journeys is a thematic study, full of unexpected discoveries and amazing stories. I keep detailed travel notes that become the foundation for my videos. I narrate the main videos myself in Russian, and for English and German versions, I use artificial intelligence, so you can fully immerse yourself in the content without being distracted by my accent. Join me on these fascinating journeys through time. So, 19 kilometers from London, on the banks of the Thames, stands a palace that witnessed the greatest dramas of English history. Hampton Court is not just a royal residence, it's a theatre of human passions where the most captivating stories of 5 centuries unfolded. The main impression is, if you come to London in spring, summer, or early autumn, this is a must visit. Here, British history is intertwined with art and architecture, all resting among stunning gardens. 16 of them. 16 wonderful gardens full of shady alleys, beautiful flowers, and charming stories. Getting there from London is very easy. Just 40 minutes, and from Hampton Court Station, it's a 10-minute walk across the bridge over the Thames. You immediately immerse yourself in an atmosphere of bliss, lush greenery, and slowly flowing river. You instantly understand why Henry VIII loved this place so passionately. It all began like this. In the 14th century, these lands belonged to the Knights of the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, Hospitallers, who used them as an agricultural estate. There was a small manor house and farm buildings here. These lands were acquired in 1514 by Cardinal Wolsey, Archbishop of York and Chief Minister to Henry VIII. He was an amazing man of very humble origins, the son of a butcher, but extremely talented and ambitious. He graduated from Magdalen College, Oxford, at a very young age, around 15 years old. His Oxford education gave Wolsey the necessary intellectual foundation and connections for his subsequent career. Magdalen College was one of Oxford's most prestigious colleges, which opened the path to his ecclesiastical and political career.
The fact that he could obtain such elite education testifies to his exceptional abilities and ambitions from an early age. Later, he founded one of the most prestigious colleges, Christ Church at Oxford. Actually, it was initially called Cardinal College. Henry VIII renamed it after Wolsey fell from grace. 13 British prime ministers studied here. Lewis Carroll wrote Alice in Wonderland here, and the magnificent dining hall served as the prototype for the Great Hall of Hogwarts in the Harry Potter films. Cardinal Wolsey's motto, Dominus mihi adjutor, the Lord is my helper, which you can see under his coat of arms — he invented his own coat of arms, by the way — proved prophetic. At the end of his life, stripped of everything, Wolsey could indeed only count on God's help. So he acquired 810 acres of land for Hampton Court. Over 10 to 15 years, he spent a fabulous 200,000 crowns, about £57 million in today's money, to build the most luxurious palace in England. He built it to receive the king and high-ranking foreign guests there.
One visitor in the first half of the 16th century wrote that Hampton Court outshone the palaces of the Habsburg emperors. Wolsey wanted to show all of Europe that Henry VIII's chief minister could live as elegantly as any cardinal in Rome, but he was unlucky. In January 1527, Henry VIII and his courtiers visited Wolsey at Hampton Court, dressed as shepherds in masquerade costumes to play gambling games and dance. But this merry party became the beginning of the end for the cardinal. By this time, Henry VIII had been married for almost 20 years, but had no heirs. Wolsey was tasked with convincing Pope Clement VII to annul Henry's marriage to his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. He failed, which caused the king's absolute fury. It's difficult to say how hard Wolsey tried to carry out Henry's commission, as he was very preoccupied at this time with plans to become Pope himself. This was his fatal mistake. The king realized that Wolsey put his relationship with Rome above his interests. By 1529, knowing that his enemies and the king were preparing his downfall, Wolsey made a desperate gesture. He gifted the palace to the king, hoping to save his life. This was the most expensive gift in English history. Wolsey died in 1530, never managing to regain the king's favor at Leicester Abbey on the road to London, where he awaited trial for high treason. Now, before continuing to tell about Hampton Court and of course about the life of Henry VIII, let's give him the floor. After all, Henry VIII's reign was a turning point in English history, similar to the Norman Conquest. The Norman Conquest was an external invasion, while Henry VIII's Reformation was an internal revolution.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I know that many of you consider me practically a monster who did nothing but feast and periodically execute wives. But please give me the opportunity to tell you about myself. I was one of the most educated monarchs of my time. I spoke Latin, French, and Italian fluently, and studied theology. My personal library contained more than 1,000 volumes, a huge collection for that time. I laid the foundations of the English Navy. I founded royal shipyards in Woolwich and Deptford. I built large warships, including the famous Mary Rose. I increased the fleet from 5 to approximately 50 ships. I created infrastructure for shipbuilding.
He also introduced Italian Renaissance architecture to England, inviting the best masters of Europe. He built or rebuilt more than 60 palaces and castles. On screen you see Whitehall, St. James's Palace, Pendennis Castle in Cornwall, and Deal Castle in Kent. Besides this, he founded the Royal College of Physicians in 1518, the first official medical institution in England. Henry was quite knowledgeable about medicine and personally composed medicine recipes. He had his own pharmacy in Greenwich, where he experimented with herbs and remedies, personally studied anatomy and surgery, and had an extensive medical library. He composed his own recipes for ointments and remedies, especially after receiving a serious leg injury in 1536 at a tournament. This non-healing ulcer tormented him until the end of his life and possibly affected his character. He founded the Royal Printing Press and personally participated in editing religious texts after the break with Rome. In his youth, Henry was an outstanding athlete. He played tennis excellently, and it was his favorite sport. He built England's first indoor tennis courts at Hampton Court. They still survive today and are still used. You can see this yourself if you visit here. He participated in archery tournaments and was a skilled rider. He had no equal among the knights of his court. He was also a talented composer and musician, playing the lute, viola, flute, and harpsichord. The best European musicians worked at his court. He wrote more than 30 songs, including the famous Pastime with Good Company. It's still popular today. Listen to the group Blackmore's Night, for example. They perform it beautifully.
I love and shall until I die. Grudge who lust, but none deny. So God be pleased, thus live will I.
Not only wives, but also works of art. By the end of his life, Henry had more than 2,000 tapestries and about 2,000 paintings, one of the largest collections in Europe. Before the break with Rome, he was so religious that Pope Leo X granted him the title Defender of the Faith for his treatise against Luther. English monarchs still bear this title today. This is not surprising. I mean Henry's religiosity, with such a grandmother as Margaret Beaufort. Not as much is known about her as about Elizabeth I or Queen Victoria, but she was truly one of the most powerful and influential women in English history. With an iron hand, she brought her son Henry VII to the throne, had her own seal, and signed documents as Margaret R., Regina, controlled court appointments and state policy, planned Henry VII's marriage to Elizabeth of York to unite the dynasties, financed universities, and was one of the most educated women of her time. She was the architect of the English Renaissance and one of the most influential figures in the transition from the Middle Ages to the modern era. She showed her grandson how to rule through religion and education, and she was personally involved in Henry's education. And how can we not tell about his first wife, Catherine of Aragon? She was the widow of his older brother Arthur, and when they married, Henry was 17 and she was 23. They lived quite well for all 24 years, loving and trusting each other, but 6 of their children died and only their daughter Mary survived. But she could not be heir to the throne, and Henry VIII, as monarch, needed to preserve the throne for the Tudor dynasty. At the time of divorce, Catherine was 47 years old and could no longer have children. And if Pope Clement VII hadn't been stubborn, offended by Wolsey's intrigues and ambitions, and had allowed the divorce, England would have remained Catholic, and Henry VIII would not have become head of the Anglican Church. He had enough to do as it was. After such a lengthy but truthful rehabilitation of Henry VIII, we return to Hampton Court. Now, when you arrive in April, you're greeted by a stunning field of wildflowers, various poppies and cornflowers, and thickets of luxurious hydrangeas in front of the palace entrance. This immediately creates a wonderful mood. Every spring and summer, flower festivals are held in the 16 royal gardens and park. Wolsey's guests and later Henry VIII's arrived from London by Thames, the fastest and most pleasant route. Wolsey's main gatehouse, completed around 1521, appeared as a grandiose entrance to his palace. It was 2 stories higher than today and was covered with finely crafted domes. By the way, the combination of red brick and white stone was brought by Flemish masters. In the Netherlands, this combination had been used for centuries. Cardinal Wolsey and Henry VIII invited Italian masters who brought new decorative techniques. The combination of red and white created a Renaissance effect. Brick better withstood weather hardships, while white stone was used only for decoration. This was very practical. This combination was not just fashion, but the result of practical, economic, aesthetic, and even political factors that made it the ideal choice for 16th century English architecture. Crossing the moat over Henry VIII's bridge past the King's Beasts and under the gaze of 2 terracotta emperors, guests entered the largest inner courtyard, the lower court or base court. Only the powerful entered here. Others used the main entrance to the left into the master carpenter's court. The palace was designed as a filtering system, a series of courtyards and halls, each requiring higher rank for access. In base court, the first large court of the Tudor palace, there were 30 apartments for the most noble guests, each decorated according to the occupant's status. Each apartment had its own fireplace, wardrobe, and lavatory. In this same courtyard stands a wine fountain from which wine can still flow on special occasions today. Here too, during festivals or special events, concerts are held. Beyond the middle gates, Anne Boleyn's gateway, lies the Clock Court, the heart of the palace, named after the outstanding astronomical clock, which is the calling card of Tudor buildings. It was installed in 1540 and designed by Nicholas Kratzer. This clock still works today and shows the hour and day, month and number of days since the beginning of the year, zodiac sign, and most importantly, the tide level on the Thames, vital information for those who traveled to Hampton Court by boat. For 300 years, Kings and queens decorated this courtyard according to their taste. Here you'll see Wolsey's coat of arms. To the right of it, the high windows and gilded weather vanes of the great hall, the heart of social life. On the opposite side are the light and elegant columns of Sir Christopher Wren's baroque colonnade for the grandiose entrance to William III's new royal apartments. And opposite Wolsey's coat of arms, on the site of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon's apartments, are located the apartments of young William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland. He was George II's beloved younger son. And the Fountain Court. Here were located Henry VIII's and his wife's private apartments. However, except for Henry's bathing tower, consisting of his bedroom, bathroom, study, library, and treasury, they were built between 1689 and 1694 in the new Baroque style. Here were located the rooms of the king, queen, and their chief courtiers and servants. The Pond Garden. As you can see, here is a small garden similar to what was created by Henry VIII in the 1530s. Surrounded by a low hedge painted white and green, it's planted with plants popular at that time, primroses, violets, strawberries, and decorated with carved painted heraldic figures bearing the coats of arms of Henry VIII and his wives. Often the western entrance with the wonderful white bay window is closed, as the area behind it is partially given over to concerts or events, and you enter through the main entrance into the master carpenter's court, from which you begin your journey. This court served as the palace's main trading gates, a centralized point for receiving, checking, and distributing all food goods for the needs of the huge royal court. It was conveniently located for unloading goods, and from here it was easy to deliver products to the kitchens and storehouses. Notice the chimney stacks in this court. They're clearly visible here. At its peak, Hampton Court had almost 300 chimneys. This required an army of chimney sweeps and was a real engineering achievement of the 16th century. In Henry VIII's time, this was cutting-edge heating technology. The palace had a complex chimney system serving hundreds of fireplaces. The decorative chimney stacks at Hampton Court had both practical and decorative purposes, but their main function was utilitarian. The tall, ornate stacks created better draft. The complex shape helped smoke disperse better without lingering, and the varying heights of the stacks prevented backdraft in strong winds. From the master carpenter's court, you enter a narrow courtyard. Here were located the dry and cool rooms of the central storehouses. Freshwater fish were kept in garden ponds, while sea fish were stored in barrels with seawater and seaweed. On the second floor was the office for keeping accounts. Here worked the clerks of the green cloth, accountants who controlled expenses. They got their name from the green cloth that covered the table where they worked. Green color was traditionally associated with trade and money accounting, as green tablecloths were used in medieval banks and trading houses, and this color symbolized honesty and accuracy in financial affairs. Green fabric showed ink stains less, white documents and numbers were more visible on it, and green color was less tiring to the eyes during long document work. Within 6 months of receiving the palace, Henry began massive reconstruction. The king's court consisted of more than 1,000 people, and few royal residences could accommodate such a crowd. The first thing Henry did was increase the kitchens fourfold. By 1529, they had become a real food factory. Imagine, about 450 courtiers daily received free food and drinks twice a day, bouche of court, a 16th century royal buffet. Officials, guards, and gentlemen of the Tudor court consumed more than 1 kilogram of meat per day, which was only part of their daily diet, reaching 5,000 calories. Guests and courtiers were served year-round, not only fresh meat and fish, but also citrus fruits, almonds, olive oil, spices from the East, and even ginger brought from China. These 3 huge halls were once one room. Later it was divided by walls into 3 parts. These halls are enormous and incredibly high to vent smoke and heat. Previously, there were many shelves on the walls for supplies and dishes. There were 6 huge fireplaces for roasting meat and mechanisms for turning spits. Hampton Court's kitchens are among the best preserved medieval kitchens in the world. Many original elements still function today. Historical scenes with food replicas are recreated for visitors, medieval kitchen technologies are demonstrated, and culinary demonstrations in historical costumes are held on weekends. Hampton Court's kitchens show not only the culinary traditions of the Tudor era, but also social hierarchy, the kingdom's economic power, and 16th century international trade connections. This is a real-time machine that allows you to understand how the stomach worked of one of Europe's most luxurious courts. There were several cellars for storing the best European wines. The main suppliers were France, Germany, and Spain. At the end of the Great Kitchen are windows through which finished dishes were passed, which were then carried to the Great Hall or to rooms. There was also a special person who monitored the return of valuable dishes after meals. By the 1530s, Hampton Court was simultaneously a palace, hotel, theatre, and huge entertainment complex. Henry used it to demonstrate greatness and power in every possible way, with luxurious banquets, extravagant court life, and incredibly expensive works of art. The Great Hall, 32 meters long, 12 wide, and 18 high, is an architectural jewel and the heart of the Tudor Palace, one of the most impressive rooms in English architectural history. Its construction took 5 years. The Great Hall remains a living witness to 5 centuries of English history, from Tudor banquets to Shakespearean plays, embodying the greatness and continuity of the British monarchy. The ceiling of cantilever beams, designed by Henry VIII's court carpenter James Needham, was painted in blue, red, and gold colors. From the ceiling, decorative figures look at you, eavesdroppers. They served as a reminder to courtiers not to gossip at the table and symbolize the king's constant control over the court. Be sure to find them when you're here. They're very diverse and amusing. Under Henry VIII, courtiers were fed here twice daily in 2 shifts. On special occasions, tapestries were hung on the walls. Chandeliers were lowered on cords from above, creating a luxurious banquet hall or theatre. The king sat on a raised platform facing the hall. Courtiers were placed according to strict hierarchy. Musicians played from the minstrels' gallery at the far end of the hall. In 1603, when James I ascended the throne, Shakespeare's company received royal patronage and was renamed the King's Men. This fundamentally changed the actors' status. They became servants of the royal court. At Christmas 1603, the King's Men performed in the Great Hall. Courtier Dudley Carleton wrote to his friend, "We had a merry Christmas. In the first days of the holidays, we had a play every night in the Great Hall. On New Year's night, we had a play about Robin Goodfellow and a masque brought by a Chinese magician, Sweet Swan of Avon. This Robin must be Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, since Robin is another name for the mischievous elf Puck." Hampton Court has the only surviving theatre where Shakespeare's plays were performed during his lifetime, undoubtedly in his presence and under his own direction. All public theatres, the Curtain, Swan, Blackfriars, and the Great Globe, have disappeared without a trace. The stage was set up at the end of the Great Hall, in front of the minstrels' gallery and the screens, openings that were used as entrances and exits. The stained glass windows of the Great Hall were added in the 1840s during Edward Jesse's restoration and are not original Tudor elements. They depict the genealogy of Henry VIII, his 6 wives, Cardinal Wolsey, and the Tudor royal family. They're executed in 19th century Victorian style. Notice the right window. It doesn't contain portrait images of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York, but represents them through heraldic symbols and names. The red and white roses here symbolize the Lancastrians and Yorkists respectively, as well as the end of the most destructive period in medieval English history and the unification of dynasties through marriage. The marriage that created the Tudor dynasty. Henry VII defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth, and this military victory gave Henry actual power over England. Marriage to Elizabeth of York consolidated peace dynastically. It united the rights of both branches, Lancastrians and Yorkists, and deprived potential claimants from the House of York of grounds for rebellion. The white and red roses united in the Tudor rose, where the lower petals are red and the upper ones white. Henry VIII assembled a huge collection of tapestries. Wolsey began collecting them, and by the time of his overthrow, there were already more than 600. Henry brought this collection to 2,000. This was probably the largest tapestry collection in Europe. It cost fabulous money. Ambassadors visiting Hampton Court were amazed that the magnificent tapestries in the king's chambers were changed weekly. Today, the collection unfortunately has fewer than 30 specimens. Hampton Court's Chapel Royal has been in use for 500 years. In 1530, Henry VIII installed a magnificent vaulted ceiling, and in the first decade of the 18th century, Queen Anne updated the interior furnishings. In the chapel's eastern wing was a large stained glass window depicting Henry VIII, Catherine of Aragon, and Thomas Wolsey. During the English Commonwealth, the window was broken and the window opening was walled up. Now it's completely hidden by the large reredos carved by Grinling Gibbons for Queen Anne. Hampton Court was home not only to Henry VIII and his 6 wives, it subsequently served as home to 10 other royal personages. The palace holds both happy and tragic memories. I've already told you about Catherine of Aragon. Everyone knows about Anne Boleyn, who never bore a son but bore Elizabeth I. The third queen, Jane Seymour, apparently was Henry VIII's beloved wife. If you look at this beautiful sketch by Hans Holbein, you'll see that this face expresses what you want to see. It's sincere, harsh, tender, hiding something thoughtful. It reflects your mood. Holbein wonderfully captured this woman's peculiarity. She died at Hampton Court from puerperal fever, giving Henry his long-awaited son Edward, future Edward VI. Edward VI was always considered Jane Seymour's son, not just the king's son. Henry was buried next to her in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, although he had 3 more wives after her. He wore mourning for Jane for more than 2 years, much longer than was customary. Kings usually wore mourning for 40 days. They say her ghost, the white ghost, appears on the anniversary of her death. She was the only one who fulfilled her task, bore the king a son, and died 12 days later, remaining in his memory as the ideal wife-mother, not having time to become a source of problems like the others. Henry's 5th wife, Catherine Howard, was arrested at Hampton Court and later executed at the Tower for treason. Legend says her ghost still runs through the gallery between the king's chambers and the chapel, trying to reach the king and beg for mercy. She was seized by guards right at the chapel door and led back to her room. Catherine Parr, a happy ending. Henry VIII married his 6th and last wife, Catherine Parr, in 1543. Catherine Parr was more than a wife. She was an intellectual partner, political ally, caring nurse, and true friend to Henry in his difficult final years. Their relationship was based on mutual respect, common interests, and deep affection, which was rare in marriages of that time, especially royal ones. Besides this, Catherine sincerely enjoyed close relationships with Henry's three children, Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward. She personally participated in Elizabeth and Edward's education. In this painting, Henry is depicted with Jane Seymour, Edward, Mary, Elizabeth, and two beloved court jesters peering from the pond garden. Jane Seymour is depicted here posthumously, so Henry commanded. Catherine Parr influenced Henry's adoption of the Third Act of Succession in 1543, which restored his daughters Mary and Elizabeth to the line of succession, which hadn't existed before, and it was thanks to this act that Elizabeth I was able to become queen. And what's completely surprising, Catherine was appointed regent from July to September 1544, while Henry was on military campaign in France. If he had lost his life, she should have ruled. But if you think that's all, you're sorely mistaken. We've only seen 1/3 of this magnificent palace complex. I won't tell in such detail further, but I'll show you several interiors of the apartments of William III and Mary II. In 1689, William III and Mary II commissioned Christopher Wren to build a new baroque palace that could rival Versailles. The plan was ambitious to replace Henry's palace, except the Great Hall, with a modern baroque palace. Interestingly, they were cousins. William was the son of Princess Mary Stuart, and Mary was the daughter of James II. They both had legitimate rights to the throne, and both were crowned. This is the only case in British history when both king and queen were crowned as joint rulers with equal powers. The interiors of William III's chambers at Hampton Court are a triumph of Baroque art, where Wren's architectural mastery, Verrio's painting genius, and Gibbon's carving art combined to create a royal residence worthy of rivaling Versailles. Every detail was designed to demonstrate power, greatness, and the refined taste of the English monarchy. The grand staircase lives up to its name. On its wall is depicted the colorful and expressive Alexander's victory over the Caesars by Italian artist Antonio Verrio, circa 1636 മുതൽ 1707. William III considered himself Alexander, of course. The king's state apartments stretch from the throne room through 5 staterooms. The rooms are distinguished by magnificent high ceilings, creating a sense of grandeur and emphasizing royal status. There was very little furniture in these public rooms. This allowed accommodation of large numbers of courtiers, but also because no one was allowed to sit except the king. The rich wood carving in these rooms was the work of Grinling Gibbons, who was also responsible for most of the decorative stone carving on the exterior of the Baroque palace. The most private room was the king's closet, the king's private study where only the most trusted persons were admitted. And this is a small fraction of the amazing interiors, furniture, luxurious chandeliers, mirrors, libraries, and sculpture gallery. The palace once housed Raphael's cartoons, now stored in the Victoria and Albert Museum.
What else must be seen is Wolsey's study. Today, this study is somewhat lost in the middle of the Baroque palace, but originally it was part of the chambers created by Thomas Wolsey for Henry VIII. Perhaps it was here that plans for divorce from Catherine of Aragon were discussed. On the ceiling, Wolsey's motto is still visible: Dominus mihi adiutor, the Lord is my helper. Throughout the palace, intertwined letters H and A were once carved, symbolizing the union of Henry and Anne Boleyn. After her execution, almost all were erased, but several survived in the Great Hall and above passages. Be attentive, and you'll definitely see them. From the 1760s, the palace was partially used as grace and favor apartments, free apartments for those who rendered exceptional services to the crown. some old plaques can still be seen today. The Cumberland Art Gallery is a luxurious art gallery located in the restored 18th century apartments in the heart of Hampton Court. In the 1730s, King George II commissioned architect William Kent to design private apartments for his beloved son, William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland. These chambers were created from 16th century rooms that Cardinal Wolsey built for Henry VIII. The apartments are one of the earliest surviving examples of Gothic revival in Georgian style, and much of the original decorative scheme is well preserved, despite damage from the 1952 fire.
After the fire, these Duke of Cumberland apartments were returned as close as possible to William Kent's original design. The gallery opened in November 2014 after major restoration. In the gallery, you can see masterpieces from the royal collection, including works by Rembrandt, Caravaggio, Van Dyck, Holbein, Canaletto, and Gainsborough. The paintings mainly reflect periods of royal residence at Hampton Court.
The gallery represents a stunning space in perfect balance, as both historical interior and gallery worthy of the royal collection, allowing better understanding and feeling of the tastes and lifestyle of Hampton Court's former inhabitants. The lighting system is excellently executed, delicately highlighting the artworks without disturbing the historical atmosphere of the rooms. And that's not all. The Georgian era is also represented here by luxurious apartments erected by Christopher Wren on the site of Anne Boleyn's former chambers. The decorator of these rooms was the famous William Kent. These apartments are an opportunity to see 3 centuries of architecture in one space: Tudor foundation, Georgian decoration, and modern museum presentation. They are a living history of English interiors, where each room tells how tastes, technologies, and the royal family's lifestyle changed over centuries. I only glanced in there briefly because I had little time, but I'll definitely come again and advise you to do the same. And not to tell at least a little about Hampton Court's gardens is absolutely impossible. Hampton Court's gardens are a living poem of 5 centuries, written with flowers, water, and light on 60 acres of royal land. Imagine, you walk the same paths where Henry VIII's 6 wives once strolled, where Shakespeare might have sought inspiration for his plays, where Elizabeth I danced under the stars after victory over the Armada.
Here time flows differently. In spring, the gardens explode in a symphony of colors. First, an ocean of daffodils turns the wilderness into a golden sea, then 100,000 tulips create living pictures that take your breath away. In summer, the air intoxicates with the fragrance of 400 varieties of roses, and in autumn, leaves dance over the mirror surface of canals.
Every turn of the path is a new discovery. Now a mysterious maze keeping secrets of 3 centuries. Now the great vine whose roots remember the times of George III. Now baroque fountains soaring to the sky with royal grandeur. The gardens breathe with royal passions. Here they fell in love and parted, plotted intrigues and celebrated victories, dreamed of power and sought peace. This isn't just a botanical museum. It's a theater of human destinies under the open sky, where every flower and every tree keeps echoes of royal hearts.
At Hampton Court, the gardens aren't just beautiful, they're magical. Here you feel part of great history, where beauty and power, love and betrayal intertwined in the eternal dance of time. Every summer, magic blooms. The famous Hampton Court Palace Flower Show. This isn't just an exhibition, but a real fairy tale, where thousands of roses, lavender, and peonies create living pictures in the shadow of the royal palace. Here time stands still, and hearts fill with that special English romance that lives among petals and royal alleys. And finally, it makes sense to go to Hampton Court for half a day, or even better, for a full day. Then you'll really get pleasure from both art and life. Although it's only 40 minutes from London, it's clearly underestimated by tourists. There are far fewer people than at Windsor. The palace has a very decent cafe, or you can bring food, a blanket, and have a picnic. In the gardens, you can settle right on the grass under trees. You should get the audio guide at the visitor center. Although I don't like them, this is a different case. The audio guide here is very decent. Surprisingly, the souvenir shop where they give out audio guides is also very good. Much better than usual souvenir shops. And a little more finally. I can't stop talking about Hampton Court, the Great Maze. Hampton Court's famous maze created around 1700 is Britain's oldest puzzle maze. The path to the center is a third of a mile, about 500 meters, and the average completion time is 20 minutes, but only for those who know the way. The palace is famous for its ghosts. Jane Seymour, the white ghost appearing on the anniversary of her death, Catherine Howard, running through haunted gallery Cardinal Wolsey, sometimes seen in the chambers he once created, and several other less noble ghosts. I hope you won't meet them. So, if you want to experience 5 centuries of English history in one day, feel like a guest of kings, and understand how an empire was born, go to Hampton Court. This is a journey that will change your understanding of England.